In the first place, most princes apply themselves to the art of war, in which I have neither ability nor interest. Instead of the good arts of peace, they are generally more set on acquiring new kingdoms by hook or by crook than on governing well those that they already have. That was Thomas More of the famous Utopia. The danger is not that a particular class is unfit to govern. Every class is unfit to govern. That is Lord Acton. You may know him best from his most noted quote, "Absolute power corrupts absolutely." The legislative cannot transfer the power of making laws to any other hands, for it being but a delegated power from the people who they have, it cannot pass it over to others. That was John Locke. The one pervading evil of democracy is the tyranny of the majority, or rather that party, not always the majority, that succeeds by force or fraud in carrying elections. That again was Lord Acton. A popular government without popular information or a means of acquiring it is but a prologue to farce or tragedy, or perhaps both. Knowledge will forever govern ignorance, and a people who mean to be their own governors must arm themselves with the power knowledge gives. James Madison, one of America's founding fathers, and highly influential in the Federalist. Now, folks, this is AllMinucOne. Welcome. I am Bill. Please like, share, and subscribe. If you think you're subscribed, check that out, because I've lost a couple subscribers, maybe because I'm not that good at what I do. I have no idea. Maybe because I said something that annoyed somebody. I don't know. If you want to leave over petty things, that's fine. I'm going to keep doing this regardless. I'm a truth seeker, and I'm an individual who wants to get out of this zombie, like, sheeple mode that our nation and the nations across the world have become. I want to see strong, robust people, strong societies. And I'm no utopian. I understand the nature of human beings. But I think that that nature is mitigated very much so when people decide to step up and be brave and educate themselves and speak of things and talk about things and say, no, I'm not going to take this anymore. So, folks, again, if you were subscribed, you were unsubscribed or whatever, not by your fault, check that. If not, you want to be unsubscribed from me, that's fine. It's whatever. But I got to talk about some stuff today, folks, that's, also likely to get me banned. Probably not, because hasn't happened yet. But there was this article that was released a little while ago, and it talks about the excess deaths with the COOF. Now, this is from November 27th, so not very long ago. But here it was retracted. This is a Google Doc. You can still find it, but it literally says retracted by the newsletter. And the reason is here. It says, a closer look at the U.S. deaths due to the COOF. Note, after the newsletter published this article in November 22nd, it's brought to our attention that the coverage of Geneva Braid's presentation, COOF deaths, a look at the U.S. data, has been used to support dangerous inaccuracies that minimize the impact of the pandemic. And so they said they retracted it. You can still find it. Da 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 da. I don't know what they're talking about because I have a BBC article right here from April 16th. As I have said, as I have always said, as I will continue to say, we knew everything we needed to know about this virus back in April and May, especially by the end of May. And I'm not going to go through this article. I've already read it before, but I want you to look this up. Coronavirus, how to understand the death toll. This was literally a report from doctors in the UK talking about what excess deaths are, the people that are dying, the people why they are dying due to the coof. Let's see, for my sake here, if I can, dark mode. And you can see the ages, males, females, different diseases, and the relation of pre-existing conditions, something everybody knows, we talk about. It goes through and through, and eventually the doctor says that what we'll see is probably within a year, we'll adjust these rates. And, something I didn't bring up today, but you look it up, guys, there is a lack of flu all of a sudden, magically. Lack of flu. No flu exists now. So I brought up these original quotes because I think that this is really what's going on. I tend to be skeptical of people who want power, people in government bodies, people who are bureaucrats, people who are wealthy and want to tell you how to live and what to do. They don't have your best interest at heart. If they did, they would leave you alone. Which is why I brought up Thomas More's quote here, because I found it fitting. It is true. Most of the people who are globalists would rather make war and chaos. I also found it fitting because I had been watching the British show that came out on Channel 4 some odd years ago, I think in 2014 it was, called Utopia. It only has 2 seasons. Netflix did a redux of it, and I've only seen some clips and kind of heard about it, and it's trash, guys. Or not Netflix, sorry, Amazon. But it's trash, guys. It's complete garbage. It is an Americanized, retarded version of the original visionary show, because the show was quite beautiful, artistically, aesthetically. And the subject matter was deep. And being a British show, it was kind of dry, but it had good humor in there, here and there. It was also quite brutal as far as the violence and the subject matter. And essentially the idea is that these people would release a virus or fake a virus and then vaccinate people that would sterilize them in order to control the world population. This is a common trope in science fiction. It's also very scary when you hear people like Bill Gates say such things as we need to vaccinate people because there's too many people in the world. All this climate change stuff, right? Of course, climates change. The climate always changes. That's actually part of the definition of the climate. However, when you get people saying that, we have too many people on the earth, blah, 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 we got to do something about it, we have to enact it, we're getting in scary times. I'm not suggesting that the current coof pandemic is that, but there are people saying that they want to take advantage of this time, the Great Reset by Charles Schwab, if you would, and the World Economic Forum. We have people like Joe Biden, who may very well end up being the president, talking about the slogan "Build Back Better," which is something that comes from like 2014 and the World Economic Forum and the Great Reset. It's scary and dangerous times we live in, folks, and information is the important part of this. Lord Acton knew what power did, and he knew that no one should really have it. This is an important quote by John Locke because other than Montesquieu, Locke was largely what the founders, that in the Bible, biblical principles, is what the United States Constitution was based on, the principles of the government. And we've gotten so far away from that. And we have allowed the legislature to transfer power. That we've transferred power over to epidemiologists, to science, to the experts. That's a way of saying you're too stupid. And maybe you are stupid. I don't know. And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with you not being as smart as the next guy. But just because you're not in the muck and the mire of the data doesn't mean you can't make your own decisions. Doesn't mean that you can't live for yourself. It doesn't mean that you cannot be a productive and important member of society. Now, the Congress and Senate in the United States has increasingly, over the years, given more and more power over to the president. And we're at this point now where people seem to think that the president is the end all and be all. It is why there is worship of Donald Trump or Barack Obama for that matter. But I think, just in my opinion, the worship of Donald Trump is, there is definitely an extreme element of Trump supporters. But a lot of it's jokes. A lot of it's fun. But watch how the media treats Barack Obama. He was just in an interview. I believe it was 60 Minutes where he was talking about you can't do whatever you want. You can't ban you can't ban media outlets or attack journalists. You can't do this and that. And everything that he was claiming that Donald Trump does is something that he has specifically done, as well as drone and bomb many people. He did all of that by the legislature essentially giving over their power. And of course here, this is quite fitting because it says by force or fraud in carrying elections. This isn't about, though, folks, this force or fraud that is going on now in the United States. It is never about party. In fact, party is not what we're talking about here. It's just the Washington establishment. What we're talking about here are globalists. There are some on the Republican side and some on the Democrat side. Doesn't matter. There are many on the progressive side, by the way. It's actually part of their goals, their Stalinistic goals. It's always a matter of tyranny. Here, Acton talks about the tyranny of the majority. That is quite bad. There's also a tyranny of a minority as well. The best thing that we can do is allow our people to be free. And we do that by having minimal government and allowing people to be educated. And allowing people to be educated not by the government. Now, don't get me wrong. I have a 16-year-old daughter who is in government schools. But I've always educated her. In fact, I took it upon myself to help educate her as she was coming up. I've sat down and had many conversations with her. I've let her read many books. And in fact, I point to books to her when we have certain conversations. Yesterday, I'm not sure what we were even talking about, but one of the things I ended up talking about was UBI, Universal Basic Income, and the idea of human greed. And so I pointed her to Aristotle's On Politics, Book 2, where he talks very specifically about how the Greeks, who very much had a communistic, socialistic society, despite whatever the Marxist theorists believe today, that stuff has existed since the beginning of time. I hear all kinds of crazy stuff from Marxists, or at least read crazy stuff from Marxists online, or watch them give silly arguments. But the reality is it's always existed. And the UBI was something very specific in Greece that just was not good. It wrecked their treasury because men just want to keep upping the amount. And so Aristotle's solution was teach men not to be greedy, more or less. Teach them to be content with what they have. But with all that, let's get back to this. So again, I don't need to read through all of this, but it says from mid-March to mid-September, U.S. total deaths have received 1.7 million, of which 200,000 or 12% of deaths are COOF related. Instead of looking directly at the COOF deaths, Brand focused on total deaths per age, per cause of death in the U.S. and information to shed light on the effects of it. She explained that the significance of it by deaths be fully understood through comparison of number of deaths in the United States, blah, 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 blah. And essentially what it says, she also noted that 50 to 70,000 deaths are seen both before and after the COOF, indicating that the number of deaths was normal long before the COOF emerged. This is not necessarily true, but could be true because you have to realize that this thing has been out there probably since last October or November for sure. We know that they knew about it in Wuhan since then. Wuhan's a very large city, I think 11, 12 million, maybe more than that, and a economic center where lots of people were traveling. This thing was around the world a long time ago. No one knew about it or cared because there was no reason to, until there was more and more media coverage of it and fear. Now, I should note too, I'm making this video. I did have a family member pass away who was in the hospital. Now, I'm not particularly close with him. It's a second cousin of mine, but I do know them. I did grow up with them to some degree. And it's sad, and I'm sad for the family. So I'm not making any claims that this thing doesn't exist. What I'm saying is that it is not something that should be ruling our lives. This particular person was in their 60s. I haven't seen them in a long time, but I don't know about their health, their weight, if they had heart disease, any of that stuff. But I do know they were in the hospital for over a month. They had viral pneumonia before they tested for the COOF. And this seems to be the thing that goes on and on. I have an uncle right now who's in the hospital, or at least as far as I know. Yet again, a friend of my wife's who I believe is in her 30s had this a few weeks ago that we knew, and she has some health conditions. She was perfectly fine. People, you have to understand that we live in a world where people die. We cannot stop that. We can take precautions to help each other out, but we cannot stop death. We need to stop acting like we're going to live forever. It is a strange thing. It is a strange phenomenon with modernity. There is no more a memento mori. That is the Latin phrase, remember, you will die. It is a reminder. And I'm, someone who I had to come to terms with death very young. Before essentially crossing borders into Iraq, I was in Kuwait and had meditated on the thoughts of it. And I understood and knew. I had the conversations with my parents. And we're talking at the very beginning of the war in 2003. I've worked dangerous job situations. I mean, I've had to wrestle people for firearms before. It's not something that I want people to have to live or go through. I'm just saying that it is a reality. No one lives forever. And again, my condolences to the family. I'm sorry, I'm not trying to downplay that death. What I'm saying is that we are overreacting to this thing. And I will show you, as I've shown you before, the numbers. They haven't changed, folks. Things haven't changed. So let's get back to this. So it says, it comes as a shock. It says, the data suggests that in contrast to most people's assumptions, the numbers of deaths is not alarming. And in fact, it is relatively no effect on the deaths in the United States. This comes as a shock to many people, how this data lies so far from our perception. And it goes on. It shows some graphs and numbers, and it talks about right here, probably more of the important stuff is week ending in April 11th, 2020. the 18th and 25th, and how these things changed. All of a sudden, heart disease numbers dropped. They were negative. Cancer numbers seemed to drop, but then went up. Chronic respiratory illness dropped. Cerebral vascular disease dropped. Alzheimer's dropped. Diabetes, by the way, Alzheimer's is essentially, from what we understand, an inflammation and diabetic response localized in the brain. Your brain, despite what many people will tell you, relies primarily on ketones, and when it becomes too sugar adapted, it can't get the energy it needs, therefore it isn't functioning. I'm not saying I know everything about it, but I'm just saying that this is one of the prevailing theories about what Alzheimer's is, and therefore if your brain shuts down, right, you die. That's why Alzheimer's kills people. Flu and pneumonia, down, negative 236, and it continued. And so forth. So, and then the COOF itself and heart disease, plus. So, again, just for the sake of time, I'm not going to go through this whole article. It is out there. But this study was done and then retracted. Well, why was it retracted? Probably because it debunks narratives. And again, this article from the BBC that I covered a long time ago, I posted this on my personal Facebook back when it came out. I mean, this is the reality, folks. Here's a CDC report about excess deaths, and then it goes into race and ethnicity. This is from October 23rd. And just this quick little tagline here. It says, from late January to early October 2020, the U.S. had, so many excess deaths in the same period of the previous year. At least 2 out of 3 of these were excess deaths were from COOF. That's not true because the CDC has said before that only about, 9-10% of the deaths were from that alone. The latest percentage increases were the largest percentage increases were among people who were Hispanic or Latino, adults aged 25 to 44. Well, that's not the people at risk. That is not the people this is affecting. Right here, the WNK News. CDC shows the COOF has high survival rate. Doctors still want to see precautions taken. CDC update Wednesday said, this is from September, by the way, and updated September 26. But it says the CDC says individuals are more likely to survive the COOF after contracting it. The health agency says if you have the virus between the ages of 0 to 60, you have a 99% chance survival rate. If you were over 70, the survival rate is nearly 95%. Now, this is in September. Ron DeSantis put an article out about this. By the way, DeSantis said that he would never lock down Florida again. Here is Breitbart saying the same thing. There is a higher percentage chance for those 69 and above, right? Or 70 and above. This here is the data, folks, in New York City, the most effectively hit. You take this number, you do a little division. The easiest way to do this is to take that 100,000 to 1,000. You take this number and you see that there's about that 10,000, there's about a 2% chance. 2% in the aggregate. Which is what it's always been. I had this conversation with someone months ago. And they're like, well, it's more like a 2%, but it isn't that bad. And I'm like, no, in the aggregate. Look at that center number, the big one. Right here, 75 and older. That's the people at risk. Here's the 65 and older. You notice the steady climb up. And 100,000 people, not even one from 0 to 17. You have 4 from 18 to 24, and so forth. Do people get this who are that age and pass away? Well, yes, the numbers say it right here. There are cases. From what I've seen, in many of those cases, people had serious health problems, heart disease already, and we don't know if they would have died otherwise. We're not tracking everything, and we're not correcting the numbers appropriately. We know that. I have an article. Let's see if I can find it real quick here. Well, it's in here somewhere, but let's move on. But I do have an article that is brought up, I believe I've used before, which talks about the 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 numbers not being as bad as people think. So here are the biweekly changes. You can look at this number. This is Our World in Data. This is a far better site than the CDC or Johns Hopkins. I can promise you that. The information is organized well. So we can look at the increases. This is over the last few weeks. Interestingly, China just keeps decreasing. Here we have death rate versus population density. This is interesting because we don't see a huge amount of correlations. Here, Japan, South Korea, Singapore, China, huge population density. Less population density, United States, UK is pretty populated for its size, but it doesn't make sense. So what is the differentiating factor? Well, it's probably something more to do with the health of those peoples and those nations. Here is the fatality rates. I do this almost every time I make a COOF video. The numbers went up and they dropped. Now, if you look at the bottom here, South Korea was flatline the whole time. Not because they locked down, folks. They were barely in a lockdown. New Zealand, flatline. Hong Kong's way down there. Singapore, way down there. Denmark. Taiwan. Switzerland, spiked a little bit. Germany spiked some. Russia, very flat, but we don't know if they're tracking properly. And by the way, folks, all of this is a matter of which nation is how they're classifying deaths. Some of these other nations, like South Korea or Singapore, they may very well be tracking these deaths in a more coherent way and not just saying that every person that had the COOF or had the COOF within 2 weeks suddenly, died from it. And that was the article that I was going to bring up. I'm pretty sure it's in here. I'll find it. Where in the UK, they were going to reevaluate their numbers because if someone had tested for it a month ago and then died in a car accident, they would call it a COOF death. Very shady stuff. So the United States, there's the Netherlands. Somehow the United States is way worse, though. There's France. Here's the United States. There's Brazil. And you got to start wondering what the media is telling you. Now here's Sweden. Huge spike. Very sharp spike. Very drastic decline. Ireland, rather kind of not bad. Australia, whole island, they flatten out, but they're going through crazy stuff right now. Crazy police state stuff. Italy, we know, was hit very hard. And then the UK. So, again, you can go through and we can look at confirmed cases. We can look at confirmed deaths. Let's just go to confirmed deaths real quick. So this is linear. Let's go to a logarithm. And we can see they shot up and then just flatlined. And we can look at tests, confirmed cases, all that stuff. Daily confirmed cases and deaths. Cases, deaths, way down here. Look at the numbers, folks. We're in hundreds of thousands of cases and only a few thousand deaths. And we can go back. And the death rate has remained the same regardless of the spread. In fact, it's actually dropped. So we can look at this as, again, as a logarithm. It's a little bit different here, but it's not, it seems to read differently. But you can see here how the initial spike happened. So This says Switzerland is choosing austerity over life. And this is about, the Swiss just not doing it right, that they've suffered so much and blah, 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 blah. And the media. This is from Foreign Policy, which is, when it says foreign policy, it means globalism. Okay, this was way back when. May 1st, the coup, twice as many COVID deaths in Wales, poor areas. Well, this is a lot like back here where I showed you the CDC, where it says 2 out of 3, and it says Hispanic and Latinos from 25 to 44, except for there is no data saying that that's a really at risk rate. So what is going on? Why are there these excess deaths in these areas? And again, I'm not going to read through this. I covered this article a long while ago. Again, I've had this laying around forever. I had to go find it again for today. What I do want you to see is this. Meet the 101-year-old who was born on a ship during the 1918 flu pandemic. Just beat the coof. Beat the Ronas. 100-year-old Marine vet survives in Central Florida. 113-year-old woman in Spain becomes world's oldest coof survivor. That was in May, folks. Back in May. And you can look this up, and there is just story after story after story after story of centurions or people who are close to that age. Life expectancy in the U.S. is, I think, 68 or 69 for males, and females, I think, 72, so it makes it like 70, and that is the average age of death. And then we have this. And, as tragic as I know it is to lose anyone, there's this lady here who wasn't so much scared of the virus, but didn't want to be alone. She was locked in her nursing home and could not see her family. And so she euthanized herself. And this is just sad. I've seen other articles. I don't have them brought up, but you can look for them where elderly folk, they say, I'd rather visit my family and risk death. This woman's 90 years old. Supposedly was in good health from what I've seen. Didn't want to be alone. And these deaths of despair will continue to increase. Here we have from the LA Times. Just the other day, this was released, November 20th. It says, face mask trials don't stop the coof spread, but it shows why more mask wearing is needed. No, that's not what happened. By the way, mask, folks, are not mandatory in all nations. So it says, back in the early days of the coof, researchers in Denmark decided to conduct an unusual experiment and test infection-fighting power of face masks the same way they'd evaluate a potential vaccine or drug. At the time, the mask use was not recommended by Danish health authorities, and fewer than 5% of residents use them outside hospital settings. I can tell you, I've pointed to it before. I have other videos on this thing. There are epidemiologists out there who are literal, lifelong experts in the subject matter, and they say that these masks actually increase infection because of the moisture. You're also getting some form of hypoxia, which, by the way, folks, hypoxia isn't always necessarily bad. In fact, you can be over oxygenated. That does happen. That's why when you hyperventilate, you actually pass out, because you don't have a proper ratio of carbon dioxide and oxygen within your system. In any case, the point being is that it's just not necessarily the best. Now, if you want to wear one, fine, go for it. But so those conditions made it possible to conduct the first and only randomized control trial of the face coverings. This is not true. This has, again, been studied in laboratories and in Asian populations. This is a complete garbage article from the LA Times. But what's more garbage is they talk about the 6,000 volunteers, and overall 95 of the 4,000 volunteers who made it to the end of the study became infected. And that's an infection rate of just under 2%. But no matter how the researchers sliced and diced their data, they could not find a strong signal that the volunteers in the mask group were more protected than their counterparts in the control group. Some people wore masks, some people didn't. In fact, the people that wore masks actually even changed them out. Put a fresh one on. In a typical clinical trial, this is the point where the researchers would say their intervention didn't work. No, in a good trial, in a good study, this is what they would say. In a bad study, they just flip. But in this case, the investigators went the other way. Why are we going against the data? Why was this article retracted? What is going on? Like, do you ask yourself these things? What is going on? Why are I could have brought up, I did have up, but I was like, it's redundant to bring it up. But back when the WHO said, oh, no asymptomatic spread, and then walked it back like 2 days later. Remember Fauci said no masks? And they said, well, masks. Fauci's actually on video saying there's no asymptomatic spread that typically in a pandemic. Show you the video, folks. My Lord. Y'all don't think you're just sheeple. You're just out there listening to the experts. And you'd walk off the cliff. Let the Pied Piper take you away. Anyways, it says the problem, they said, wasn't with the masks. The problem was people didn't use masks enough. Oh, okay. The study results should be used to conclude that a recommendation for everyone to wear a mask in the community would not be effective in reducing the COOF, Team Reader wrote. Trio of editors and annuals in internal medicine. Yeah, because they're not allowed to expose the truth. It will get retracted. I'm telling you, that is what is going on. Every time they say, oh, it's not that bad, they have to turn around and retract it. Yet the actual data that you can see with your own eyes tells you what has been happening. We can see the difference. Here is the particular study, by the way, if you want to find it. It is linked in that particular article from the LA Times. Again, if you want the name of the article, it is Face Mask Trials Didn't Stop COOF Spread. So, and you can also find this on Archive today in case there's any funny business. Now here, 1123, says COOF nursing home deaths surpass 1,000. Well, yeah, because those are the people at most risk. And it actually gives numbers here very specifically. And this is in Arkansas. Old article here from the Daily News. Shocking. 66% of new COOF patients in New York stayed home. That's May 6th. Yeah, we're talking about lockdowns again. It'll do nothing but cause more despair, destroy more businesses, and transfer wealth to these giant corporations, folks. This was the Telegraph article. That's what I was looking for earlier. Daily COVID death count could be scrapped. A review will examine reports that officials were over-exaggerated. So you can go find that. Daily COVID death count could be scrapped. That was the article I was talking about earlier. And then from Spiked. There is no empirical evidence for these lockdowns. Now, this was a large study done back in April, saying there was no statistical difference in the lockdowns and the stop of the spread. You got people who are afraid to go to Halloween, or sorry, not Halloween, Thanksgiving. You're going to have people afraid to go to Christmas. May 11th, covered this before too. UPMC doctor argues coof not as deadly as feared. Says hospital will shift back to normal. This is the head of the Pittsburgh area hospital system. Something like 7, 8, whatever hospitals he runs. This is a local paper. This is Penn Live, Patriot News. Folks, what are we doing? I know people are scared. I know people are dying. People are always going to die. What are we doing when all of the data says, hey, no matter what you do, things are the same? My daughter's in and out of school. Not that big a deal. She's older. She's not, whatever. But I'm just saying, for her, that's not stability. Businesses are closing down by the dozens. You have guys like Gavin Newsom out there suggesting that Hollywood, they're essential. But everybody else, you're not essential. Well, I'm sorry, folks. Any job is essential to the person who needs it. I'm probably not going to finish my certification program, my physical therapy stuff, because, well, why should I when I have no idea if the stability of schooling right now is going to be maintained over the next few years, especially if Joe Biden becomes the president. Something scary right now going around too about people wanting President Trump to declare martial law because there was evidence of the server over in Germany that was apparently a CIA farm thing that Lieutenant General, what's his name? McInerney, or however you pronounce his name. McInerney, I believe. He was on a program the other day that was saying that there were 5 servicemen killed. They secured these servers. This was the whole Kraken thing. I don't know what's true, what's not true. I know that having information is important, though, so that I can make up my mind. I know that I look at these numbers. I show you these things, folks. I show you all of these things because this is something I more or less can trust. It's not hard to look at data. Now, maybe you don't want to do that. That's fine. That's why you have people like me who are out there trying to expose this. There are other people. I often mention Computing Forever, Dave Cullen over in Ireland, and the great videos he's been making about all this. There's another gentleman, Spiro, I can't recall his last name. But next time I make a video on this, I'll bring him up for certain. And just understand, guys, that this is more fear-mongering than it is reality. And I'm not saying it isn't potentially lethal or could put people over the edge. Again, I finally, after, 10 months, know people who've been affected by this. But most of the data suggests that a lot of these people would have passed away within a year anyways. And that is precisely what the BBC article was speaking to. I might have closed that out by mistake. In any case, I was going to bring that back up. But, guys, you have to keep your head up. You cannot let your liberty be taken away because you're afraid of death. You cannot be afraid to die. If you're afraid to die, you have some deep spiritual work that you need to take care of. It is part of life, and it can happen at any moment to any of us. And that's Not just me talking as a once long ago infantry marine who was trained to run at bullets, right? I mean, mostly you're keeping your head down and trying to get what's called fire superiority. But folks, we really need to think what's going on here. We really need to analyze things. We really need to look at the media and what they're telling us. Many of you, maybe not you listening to me, but many people out there have a normalcy bias. They can't believe that these things are so fantastical that are going on, that there's some sort of conspiracy, if you would. There's some sort of call by people in power to use this to manipulate the rest of society. It's too fantastical. Then you get confirmation bias, where you just see the stuff that confirms your own fear. You get backfire effect, where things like I'm showing you today turns around and goes, no, that can't be true, and confirms your bias that you already have. None of that is thinking. Thinking requires you to go to places that may not be popular. It's one of the reasons why I title my YouTube channel AllMinucOne, because it's Mills's argument, John Stuart Mills's argument On Liberty about the freedom of speech, because the opinion might be true. Because if all of mankind, minus one person, said otherwise, that one person still might be right. Knowledge, science, information, opinion, none of them are democratic. But they should be freely sourced. And we have big tech, social media, governments, government agencies, including generals, that have lied to our president, our sitting president, that was elected by the people, about troops and foreign nations and who knows what else. This is not a good time, folks. This is not a good time in history right now. But it will be if you say no, and you start saying no on a regular basis, and you start standing up to other people. Frankly, I'm at a point where if someone says something opposite to what I'm seeing and all the information that I have, I'm just going to say, well, you're low information. Low information, low resolution. And you probably are. That's the Dunning-Kruger effect. I covered this in a video a few months ago. I've not been at this long, but long enough that I've covered the important things because I understand logical fallacies and psychological biases in human nature. I've worked with human beings. I mean, we all do, but I mean, I've worked with some of the worst human beings my entire life. I've worked with difficult human beings, underintelligent human beings, people who could care less about you, people that are actually literally evil. Like, and I mean that. I've confronted, man, there's a gentleman, and I'll get off here after this, but there's a gentleman some years ago in the jail that I worked in that had murdered his roommate randomly. Stabbed him in the chest, I think 3 or 4 times with a knife. Shoved his roommate in the closet and continued to live his life for over a week. His roommate's girlfriend came around. The girlfriend smelled something funny. And this guy, maybe not so much a gentleman, maybe I shouldn't call him that, but this person decided he was going to lie to her and said he hadn't seen him. She called the police. They searched the apartment, found the body. Then he confessed to the police that he's like, yeah, I knew, I was eating dinner and he came over and I knew it was him or me. I stabbed him in the chest 4 times. The same person decided he was going to kill his cellmate. And I was there. I was locking the inmates in after we fed them. And I was on the upper tier and I walked down and I saw a little crowd by his cell. And they kind of scattered as I went that way and locked in. And I heard this like this very faint, weak voice. And I called for the door of the radio. It opened and this kid scrambled out. His face was purple and he was terrified. And this guy was a little guy. I mean, I'm a pretty little guy myself, but, he was young and not a fighter. And the psychopath was not huge, but muscular and whatever. And dead in the eyes. And I told him, turn around and cuff up. And he did it and no problems. And I'm not saying that I'm particularly brave or anything like that. What I'm saying is that you don't understand how volatile people can be. You don't understand what could happen if we continue these lockdowns, how much more crazy things will get. Not just with the Antifa or Black Lives Matter or any of that. We're getting to the point where we have people who are patriots that are Trump supporters that they're on the brink, man. They really are. And it's unfortunate. This nation is at a boiling point. And much of this seems very, very engineered to me. So start looking on your own. Start researching. Start thinking. Stop being a puppet. I'm telling you, if you don't understand this stuff, guys, you are very, very low information. And you think you know more than you actually do. As I said, the Dunning-Kruger effect. I'll leave it off there, guys. Hey, got the live show, the ends_justify_memes. That is over on DLive. We are also on YouTube, and we went live last week. So the ends justify the memes. That is the live show. I'm working on getting some guests on here soon. So if you guys want to watch that every Wednesday night, 7 p.m., we do that. It's a very loose show. We just kind of talk about whatever we want to talk about. It's just two guys that are looking at the world from their own eyes and discussing it. Discussing the problems that we see. And, sometimes the conversation is highbrow and other times it's not so much. And then over on Subscribestar, if you guys wish to support me at all, you can go over there. If not, I shall survive. But with all that said, folks, please like, share, and subscribe. Make sure you're subscribed. If you haven't seen me in a while or whatever, it does happen. It's happened to me with channels. I used to watch Adam Friended a lot, and he disappeared, and I completely didn't realize I was unsubscribed to him. And I never did that. So, in any case, just make sure, because my account just went down randomly, which is weird. And I mean, like, within a week. Like, I had new subscribers and the subscribers go away. I'm not making any different content. So, that's weird. But, it's whatever. So, guys, again, thank you for watching. This has been AllMinucOne, and I wish you all well.